Join me as I dive deep into the future of Star Trek, reflect on the past of Trek, and tackle the challenges of predicting what's next for this iconic franchise here on our Star Trek Day live stream. Greetings, nerds. I'm Will Polk, host of Cena Nerd Presents Blur Trek and producer of the Cena Nerd podcast with our host, Sarah Belmont. Thank you for joining me on this live stream, or if you're watching this later, thanks for watching. Join in the conversation, drop a comment below, share your favorite episode on Star Trek Day because this is a day to celebrate all things Trek. I'm excited to be a part of it. It's a special moment for fans to come together, share our love for the franchise, and look forward to the future. Today I'm going to get into what is in the future of Star Trek, exploring what's next for Star Trek, and what we can expect from our beloved franchise. Speaking of which, stay with me today as I have a special clip for season 5 of Lower Decks that was released today as a celebration of Star Trek Day. So I haven't watched it yet, so we'll be able to watch it together here on this live stream. This is the 5th annual Star Trek Day and the 58th anniversary of the airing of the very first episode of Star Trek called The Man Trap. This episode was first aired on NBC in September 8th, 1966, but the episode actually first aired in Canada on Canadian TV in September 6th, 1966. So it was actually aired first internationally before it actually aired here in the United States. And to celebrate that, I want to show you a little teaser clip that I actually found of the original series teaser that NBC had for Star Trek.
Here among a billion stars, a lonely ship streaks along an endless path. It's the mammoth starship Enterprise. Follow her trackless journey each week on Star Trek. William Shatner stars as Captain James Kirk, Starship Commander, and Leonard Nimoy stars as Science Officer Spock, half Earthling, half Vulcanian. There are hazards that beset the Enterprise and its crew on board ship and on alien planets. Don't miss Star Trek in color.
Pretty exciting, huh? I've never seen that clip, but I actually found it today of all days, and definitely wanted to share that with the fans here. If you've never, again, we see trailers all the time for stuff, but it's just pretty cool to see the original series premiere and teaser trailer that dropped way back in the mid 1960s. So, as we move forward, it's essential to acknowledge the significance of Star Trek in pop culture, from its humble beginnings to the global phenomenon that Star Trek is today. Of course, Star Trek has inspired many fans, and its influence can be seen in every aspect from our lives. Everything from our cell phones, and as far as people career choices that they've made, and other things like that. So as we celebrate this iconic franchise, we need to think about what the future holds and what can we as fans do to ensure its continued success. The passion that we feel in the Star Trek community is well known. I mean, of course, how the original series was able to be renewed for a third season because of an intense letter writing campaign, to even a letter writing campaign today that saved Star Trek Prodigy after it was canceled prematurely, in my opinion, by Paramount Plus and was picked up by Netflix. So the passion and dedication of the community is what drives this franchise forward. And I know I'm excited to be a part of it, and I'm sure many of you are as well. So let's just take a few moments here just to share what's in the past, and let's explore what's in Star Trek's future. So part of today's live stream that I wanted to do in this video is exploring the challenges that explore, that, the Star Trek franchise has faced in the past, and how we can, ensure its continued success. The passion and dedication of the community is what drives this franchise forward. And I know I'm excited to be a part of it, and I'm sure many of you are as well. So let's take a few moments here just to share what's in the past, and let's explore what's in Star Trek's future. So part of today's live stream that I wanted to do is exploring the challenges that we can overcome them. And as we move forward, it's essential to acknowledge that the fan base, we have high expectations. We do. And these high expectations from fan base and the need for innovation in storytelling is very high risk. But in that high great risk of storytelling comes great reward. And I believe the best is yet to come for Star Trek. And one of the biggest challenges we have as fans is meeting that expectation. So, Star Trek has been around now for over 5 decades. It's one of the tentpole IP franchises in pop culture and media. When you think about it, I mean, there's Star Trek, Star Wars, James Bond, Doctor Who. There's only a hand. Harry Potter. I mean, Lord of the Rings. I mean, there's only a handful of franchises that originated in the television in this medium that has the reach that Star Trek has had. So, of course, with that comes a very deep and dedicated fan base. Sometimes that's very daunting for new fans to be able to enter this fan base because you are looking at 13 movies, over 900 plus hours of television, and it can be very overwhelming. I know my podcast partner Sarah Belmont, whenever we discussed Star Trek Picard here on the podcast, we that's one of the things that she has talked about, how hard it can be to enter this fan base because there is such lore and trying to catch up with what all has been mentioned before. So meeting that expectation not only of current fans but also not alienating new potential fans is very, very daunting. But this soundtrack has always been about pushing boundaries and exploring the unknown. So one of the ways they can do that is, finding new and innovative ways to tell Star Trek stories. And with the rise of the streaming service, of course, we do have Paramount Plus, and of course, as I mentioned before, Star Trek Prodigy is over on Netflix, and the abundance of content services out there, like Pluto, for example. You can go and watch any of the old original various shows in the Star Trek universe, from the original series all the way up to DS9, Voyager, Enterprise, etc., on Pluto TV, which is another streaming platform. It's more important than ever because of all the franchises that are out there that Star Trek has to stand out from the crowd because there is a lot of platforms out there and minimal time, especially in our very short attention span uh, environment these days, to be able to make an impact and really capture those eyeballs and bring original fans, keep established fans in there, but also bringing in new fans so this franchise can continue for another 50 years. So that franchise needs to evolve and adapt to the changing audience preferences while at the same time staying at its roots. And so this need for diversity and representation is essential, not only in what we see as far as the actors who are and characters that we're seeing up there on screen, but also in storytelling and also the mechanism for telling these stories. And Star Trek, excuse me, has always been a beacon of hope and also one of inclusivity. And as a culture, it's very, very important that we see more diverse characters and more diverse storylines in the future. This franchise has, of course, made great strides in recent years, but there's still much more work to be done. Innovation and storytelling, of course, is very essential. And with new technologies and platforms emerging, the opportunities for creative and engaging storytelling have never been more abundant. Now, be clear though, we don't want stories written by AI because we've seen what could come of that. But at the same time, the franchise does need to embrace the storytelling changes and also stories that are both authentic and captivating. So, as we look to the future, it's important to remember the rich past that Star Trek has in its history, and understanding that what works and what didn't work is crucial in moving forward. And I think that is something that we as fans have to be very careful of, that we don't get too deep in member berries, because if you do, then that makes it very inaccessible for new fans to come into the franchise. But at the same time, as I noted before, it's very important also not to be dismissive of the past that you end up alienating existing fans. So again, by acknowledging those successes and failures of the past, we can create a brighter, more exciting future for Star Trek. Because again, Star Trek has always been about exploring the unknown, and that's exactly what we need to do as a franchise and as a fan base in order for it to move forward. We have to be bold. We have to take risk. For example, Strange New Worlds took big risk in the second season, which it was very polarizing with some of the fan base, quite frankly. I mean, folks really loved it. Either you really were on board with the musical episode, for example, or you were not. But that is what's great about this franchise, is because it does take risk. And we can go back through all the past 50 years to see where they have taken risk with Star Trek, including just the simple fact of creating a next generation in the 1980s. That was a big gamble whenever you had the movie franchise going with the original series crew. But this franchise has always been about that, and always about inspiring fans, and I believe that's what we can do. So, as we explore the future of Star Trek, it's essential to remember those core values of hope and, and inclusivity, and the pursuit of knowledge. And these values have always guided the franchise and continue to be so today. And that's one of the things that Paramount and Star Trek has done with Star Trek Day this year. And one of those things is to have fans take the chair to make an impact. And uh, they had several events all across the world today, partner with worldwide nonprofits that embody the values of the franchise, including Cool.org, which is giving every K through 12 student an opportunity to learn computer science. Do something.org, which is a well-known organization out there, is fueling young people to change the world, and with community service and other projects. And Outright International, which is again advocating for the LGBTIQ community to make sure that we have inclusion and equality globally. So the Take the Chair campaign invites fans to see themselves in the iconic USS Enterprise captain's chair and ask themselves, what would I do if I were setting a course to the future? And fans will be able to engage through that digital experience available to everyone on StarTrek.com, and I've actually have done that, and it's great too because it's very cool. It gives you different options as far as what you want to do, as far when you take the center seat, and you can pick options, and it takes you to next options, and then at the end it'll give you a profile of who you are as a Star Trek fan, and as if you were on the bridge of the Enterprise, and what type of missions that you would want. So throughout the month of September, uh, the uh, Paramount is going to be donating 25% of U.S. product sales on the official Star Trek website, StarTrek.com, that will go to these three nonprofits. So go to that website. Again, the Star Trek universe is very fast, with numerous franchises and series and films that have all contributed to its success, including, from the original series to Strange New Worlds. But with each iteration of Star Trek has brought something new and exciting to the table. So now, before we get to what the future of Star Trek holds, I just want to just really quickly go through what we've known about the franchise in the past that has set the tone for what we love in the Star Trek universe. So, of course, first we have the original series, which aired in the 1960s. This is the boilerplate that set the tone for the franchise and it introduced to like iconic characters, obviously, as far as Mr. Spock, Captain Kirk, Uhura, Scotty, Dr. McCoy, Chekhov, Sulu. We had those initial characters in our living rooms, and of course, growing up as a child of the '80s and seeing those reruns, this is we all have our entry points into the Star Trek universe, and this is clearly my entry point into the universe. It was definitely a groundbreaking show that has, of course, explored complex social issues at the time. Everything from the Vietnam War to race relations, medical ethics. I mean, so many things when you go back and look at those those original series episodes, they really it was very forward leaning and always used the allegory as a method of talking about very topical issues at the time in that science fiction context to quite frankly get past network censors. But it always pushed the boundaries of what was possible on television. And of course, some of those episodes that, of course, really stand out to me as far as those that really get to that, of course, is a private little war. Of course, with the Vietnam War. Let this be your last battlefield, which really tackle race relations. Plato's Stepchildren had the one of the first interracial kisses, if not the first interracial kisses on television. And then, of course, those episodes, City on the Edge of Forever, which is one of my personal favorites. Of course, if you went back in time to basically you had the opportunity to save the love of your life versus versus letting her live. But then if she lived, spoiler alert, then the United States never would have gotten involved in World War II. So all those moral and ethical questions, they really tackle those in those original series episodes. So, of course, we move forward from the 60s into the 70s to the animated series, which many folks consider the animated series as really finishing out the original 5 year mission. Of course, most of the original cast was back doing voice work, except for Walter Koenig didn't come back as Chekhov, but he did do voice work for other characters. And of course, we go from the original animated series to, of course, the movie franchise, and of course, we got the motion picture in '79, and then, of course, the amazing, iconic trilogy of film of Star Trek II, the underrated, The Wrath of Khan, the underrated Star Trek III, The Search for Spock, and of course, Star Trek IV, which is, I think, universally loved by both fans and non-fans alike. This is truly one of those movies that no matter if you're a Star Trek fan or if you are not big on the lore of the franchise, everyone knows the one with the well. So that's Star Trek 4. And of course, we had Star Trek 5, The Final Frontier, where we meet Spock's half brother. And then the original series has their final run with their films in Star Trek 6. Then, of course, by 1987, we follow, as I mentioned before, where the franchise did take a big risk and it innovated itself and trying to do something different with the next generation. And of course, those first 2 seasons, I did a video if you want to check it out on that the first couple of years of Star Trek: The Next Generation. It's a really chronicles the creative and difficulties that that show had during those first 2 years finding its footing. But of course, as we all know, the third season it really did uh, find its footing and was the next big entry point and on ramp for many fans to go into the Star Trek universe. So that, of course, took the franchise to new heights, introduced a whole new crew. Yes, we did have the new another ship called the Enterprise, but it was Enterprise D. That show not only was a spinoff of the original, but it spawned 2 sequels in Star Trek: Deep Space Nine and also Star Trek Voyager. But it also really again was did a great job of using allegory to tell stories about the topical issues of the time in the 80s and early 90s. And really, when you look at those shows, especially now here in the early 21st century, and looking back in the late 20th century, as far as some of the issues, as far as how they dealt with them, and how much progress we've made. Even when I think about the episode where Riker was on a planet with the Janai, and he fell in love with a non-binary person. And at the time, they had a lot of issues trying to get that show produced, and really didn't tackle that issue now. To where now we're in Star Trek Discovery, and you have a non-binary character as one of the lead cast members on that ship. So again, just seeing how television has evolved over the last 20 to 30 years since the Next Generation first aired. So again, so of course that's another great thing about how Star Trek is a reflection of the times. And as I noted, we did go from Star Trek Next Generation to Star Trek Deep Space Nine, which is one of my favorite, if not the favorite series that as far as for me in Star Trek. And of course, when this show first premiered in the 90s, it was one that was a darker, grittier show, but it also all took on a lot of different issues from terrorism to religious fanaticism with to a war arc with the Dominion that was very prevalent in the final seasons of the show, and really was one of those early shows to really use serialized television and storytelling to tell their story. But also, it also tackled many issues. Of course, we're just in the Star Trek universe. We would have just, if we were in that world, we would just be still here sitting watching the news reports coming out of San Francisco about the Bell riots that had transpired on Earth during the on September 1 through 3 of 2024 and the Star Trek timeline. And that was, as Captain Cisco noted, one of the watershed events of the 21st century. And to borrow a phrase from another franchise, a nexus event, where if they whatever Gabriel Bell, spoiler alert if you haven't watched this episode, whenever the person who was Bell was lost, Cisco had to step in. But because of it was a time travel episode, and because of the changes that were made, Federation never came into existence. So that show really addressed issues of homelessness and mental illness and how the government at the time in the United States was handling those issues. And of course, we see those issues now today as we are grappling with some of these social issues in our country, and also gun violence and other things. So so again, Deep Space Nine was uh, in the 90s, but at the same time very forward looking at some of the issues that they address. Star Trek Voyager was the very first show to have a woman to be the lead, with Kate Mulgrew as Captain Janeway. Originally, Genevieve Bujold was cast as Janeway, but didn't work out. But I'm actually glad that Kate Mulgrew was brought in to uh, be the be Captain Janeway. That show, again, took this franchise in a whole new direction, and the crew of having to blend the Maquis and the Starfleet crew when they were cast out over into the Delta Quadrant, and trying to work their way to come home, and people having to come past to get through their differences to come together as a team. To it was a tribute to all the things about Star Trek, and how infinite diversity, infinite combination can really work together. And that show really was a personification of that, and it has some really banger episodes as well. As far as, again, taking on contemporary issues. Of course, we had cast changes with Jennifer Lyon leaving, Cass leaving, but then of course Jerry Ryan came onto the show and was 7 and 9, and again took that show to the next level, sort of like when Worf moved over to DS9. I mean, again, this was a show that really uh, was very groundbreaking in many ways for its time. And so we move. So the last show in the, I guess, Berman era of Star Trek was Star Trek Enterprise. And this show was a show that was a prequel of sorts. It was a prequel. It really was, you know, years after 100 so years after, I guess about 100 years, if I recall, after First Contact. Starfleet's dipping its toe into the universe. And again, this show is again a product of its time, because Star Trek Enterprise premiered in September of 2001, and of course we all know what happened on September 11th of 2001. So again, this show was also a snapshot into the uh, product of what was going on in the real world at the time. And so there was that route of exploration and learning about Earth dipping its toe for the first time out into deep space, as far as with the Warp 5 engine that the Enterprise had. But also later seasons dealt with issues of war, morality, and time travel and other things like that. So again, Star Trek Enterprise, especially on rewatch now, all these years later, it's very unfortunate that the show only got 4 seasons. because I think that fourth season, it was really starting to hit its stride. But of course, it also had the heavy weight of carrying the burden of being a flagship show on a fledgling network at that point, the UPN network. And uh, so I think, if it had been in syndication like the other three shows that preceded it with Next Generation, DS9, and Voyager, it probably could have gotten a 7 year run. But I think, given what it was having to do, and having to deal with a studio directly and carrying a network, I think it led to a premature cancellation. But if you love Star Trek Enterprise, go check out Connor Trenier and Don McKeaton. They have a podcast now where they have uh, talked about their experiences on that show. Have cast members from that show and other shows as well. But upon rewatch, I've really grown to appreciate Enterprise much, much more. And of course, I didn't touch on the Star Trek Next Generation cast. They had their movies during that time period. As far as generations, of course, we had a blending of Kirk and joining Picard's crew in the Nexus with Star Trek Generations, sort of that handover in the movie universe for the original series crew to the Next Generation crew. Then, of course, we had Star Trek First Contact, where we do see, where we get the actual first contact with the Vulcans, as far as and the Next Generation crew meeting with Zephyr Cochrane and all that. Great movie. I think, as far as Star Trek movies, as far as with the original cast, it's definitely my favorite with them. Their Star Trek. Nemesis. Uh, so after that, when there was Nemesis was the last film, and then gosh, I'm blanking on the third film with the cast, but that'll come to me. But they have four feature films in their in their repertoire, and yeah, and it was, so they carried the franchise, for many years, and then after Nemesis, there was a break with the Next Generation films, and of course we had Enterprise, and then after that things were kind of quiet until we get the J.J. Abrams films. Those movies were um, in the Kelvin universe, and which again, instead of like rebooting the whole franchise and trying to reboot at that point, the franchise was 66, and the Star Trek, the Kelvin movies came out in 2009. So instead of redoing it and trying to like retell the story in the Prime universe, they did a very, very smart thing, in my opinion, in moving those films from the Prime universe to the Kelvin universe, so that they could have their own stories and their own backstories and their own development, separate and apart from that is concurrent with what we know, because of course Spock did cross over, Leonard Nimoy did cross over between the two original Prime timeline and the Kelvin timeline. But they were also free to tell their stories. And then of course they had the second film, which was Into Darkness, which was their spin on the Wrath of Khan. And then of course Star Trek Beyond. And of course, that was Star Trek Beyond, was I thought it was good, but Simon Pegg wrote that one. But we did get the Kelvin timeline, and the Kelvin timeline really did do a lot to influence what we see now as far as the new Trek, because a lot of the creatives that were part of the Kelvin story that were developed in that timeline with J.J. Abrams came over to what we now have is the new Trek, which we first got Star Trek Discovery in 2017, 2018, which premiered in 2017. It just ended this year, and it definitely took the franchise a new direction. Again, we have a prequel series, but we're introduced us to a new crew and a new era of exploration. Those first two seasons, and then again, they did a very smart thing in taking that series and moving it to the 32nd century, so they could be free of trying to work their way around the 23rd century and the boxes that they were running up against. Even though the second season they did have Captain Pike and Spock and Number One in those shows, but at the same time, you could see where it was getting harder and harder to respect established canon with the stories that they were trying to tell. But it did lead to some amazing shows, and really the fourth and final season of Star Trek Discovery, again, like Enterprise, I think really hit his strongest point. Well, the fifth, and actually, excuse me, the fifth season, the fourth season, third and fourth season, I will freely admit I had some issues with, but the fifth season finally did really nail it. And then, but also during that time period, again, as I mentioned at the start of this video, being able to innovate and tell different types of stories and explore the uses of the streaming platforms. We got Star Trek short treks, which were introduced during the uh, Discovery time period. We got 2 seasons of short treks, and it was great because we got some very memorable stories with the short treks, and also it not only did we get the backdoor pilot of Strange New Worlds with having Captain Pike on the show was season 2 of Star Trek Discovery, but then we really, we had that very memorable short trek with Spock and Una, number 1 in the turbo lift, in Star Trek the Star Trek short treks, and actually it was even referenced later in an episode of Strange New Worlds in season 2. So again, very memorable show. Very, Calypso is another one. I won't say too much about how they've tied it into some other things so that I don't spoil it for folks who haven't seen what is to come. But Calypso is another episode of one of the short treks that came from that was a spinoff from Star Trek Discovery that got some amazing payoff down the line. And then, of course, we did get Star Trek Picard. Again, follow the again, it was took the franchise in a different way where we had an established character, but we introduced them to now we have an older John Luke, a potentially wiser John Luke. Season 2 was a deconstructed John Luke. But also it was a show that was both a sequel and a new beginning because we did get new characters introduced in Star Trek Picard, and it offered something both old and new. And I will admit, I think the second season, and I think most people would agree, the second season did start to. It was hard because I think it was right there around COVID, production wise, and there was elements of the story. It started out pretty strong, but at the same time, I think it started to run a little bit thin in some places, and I think that some of the deconstruction of John Luke was it was hard for a lot of fans to see that, to see our character be taken apart like that, as far as learning some things about his history and his backstory, and trying to respect established canon, but also try to tell something new and innovative about this particular character who's very, very well known. So that was a hard watch for a lot of fans. But again, it was bold, innovative storytelling, not just doing member berries, because I think many people, when we heard Star Trek Picard, we thought, okay, this is going to be Star Trek Picard, this is going to be Star Trek Next Generation season 8, which we kind of got in season 3 of Star Trek Picard, but not exactly either, because again, they told a new, fresh story using established lore with the Borg and Crusher and Picard and the Next Generation crew, but they put a spin on it that was very satisfying. I think because with Star Trek Nemesis, we didn't get the finality that we wanted in that fourth film. And I do remember what the name of this third film was: Star Trek Insurrection. So again, it was um, but but with the third season of Picard, yes, we will freely admit there were plenty of member berries, but at the same time, a fresh take on some of these characters, fresh things we've learned about these characters. They're older, they're wiser, they've gone through some stuff, and they really explored that in the third season of Star Trek Picard. So I think that to me was what really made me like really gravitate towards that third season, and even inspired me to like create this spin-off show on our podcast here, Star Trek Blur Trek, because we talked about it on our podcast, but I just felt like there was so much more I wanted to talk about with that show. and led me to, again, to create that show. So check out my videos here on with the third season of Star Trek Picard, and another show that came during the new Trek time period, which we're going to get to a little tease here in a minute, as far as the fifth and final season for it, is Star Trek Lower Decks. It was again a very fresh take on the show. The second time that Star Trek has gone into the animation world, but again, it introduces us to a new cast, a new crew. But here it takes sometimes some irreverent shots at our lore, but also still telling those core. Even through all those funny bits and moments with the show, it tells some funny stories with our crew of the Cerritos. So again, Star Trek Lower Decks, definitely one of my favorite. Is a show that's a tribute to the past, as well a bold step into the unknown with this franchise. So again, really honing what I mentioned before, which is really finding innovative ways to tell stories in a very established lore with this franchise. And then of course we do have Star Trek Strange New Worlds. And my take on Strange New Worlds is this is probably the best blend I've seen of episodic television, but also serialized arc with our characters that we've probably seen since the Berman era of Star Trek, where we did have that episodic episode structure, but we also had overall serialized storytelling with our characters, and continuity, which sometimes was not always there with the original series. If until the movies, we didn't always have that continuity, but with the Berman era and now in the new Trek era, we have that continuity in our story, in our characters, from Encounter of Farpoint to the end of Star Trek Picard season 3. And now with Strange New Worlds, we have that as well, where we do have in the 2 seasons and the upcoming third season. This is a show that originally got its original pilot way back in the '60s with the original pilot of the Cage. Didn't get a new series until many years later, but it really is. It does really establish. I think it has been one of the very exciting show, and it does take some bold strokes with these established characters, but also we have some new characters that are also been introduced in this show, like of course well, we see. I mean, most of the characters have, like with Ortega and Lon Noonien Singh and others. So we have gotten some new characters in Stranger Worlds, but you know they've done a good job, I think, overall with Spock. Spock is the hard one to deal with this show, to be honest, because again we have a very established character, and we have a situation where he has has a very rich story and a rich history, and trying to juggle all of those things and do it in a way that respects canon and established stories, but also give something new about this character that people know so much about. I feel like Star Trek Strange New Worlds has overall done a very solid job of doing that. So, but yeah, I mean, Star Trek Strange New Worlds is definitely one of my favorite favorite iterations of Star Trek, taking some bold steps with the show, with the characters, and it's been some very rewarding television that we've seen in this franchise. So another one, and I just realized I did not load up a asset for them, is Star Trek Prodigy, which I feel like I'm treating them like Paramount here. With let me quickly add that into my assets here, because I do not want to treat Star Trek Prodigy like Paramount has treated this franchise, because thankfully, They just had their second season on Netflix. They just premiered on July 1. Great season. I'm working my way through the second season right now because I really wanted to take my time with it and all. But first season was one of those shows that again, it's a third iteration of Star Trek into the animation foray and animation world. But they are, we do have a new cast, new crew, but they do have established characters with Janeway and now a second season with the Doctor. But again, this is a great show. Really love what they're doing with these characters. You know, bold new characters, bold stories. It's one of those stories. The great thing, I think, the thing I can sum up about Prodigy is that it's the saddest. It was billed as a kid show, but the storytelling is very adult, complex, but also accessible to kids, accessible to new fans, which I think is very important because yes, they reference lore and they reference things from the franchise from before, but at the same time, so there's that for like old heads like us, me, who have watched every episode of every of every iteration at least once. But at the same time, there's something new there for new fans. So I find that Prodigy is very accessible for new fans, and which is again a very important thing as we reflect here on Star Trek Day. What we want to happen with this franchise, which is to grow the franchise. So if you're still with me, would love for you to just hit the like and subscribe button and make sure you hit the notifications here on our show here. We'll really appreciate that. So moving from the Prodigy to the most recent thing was just a very short treks. I will freely admit, I this was one of those swings that I felt that had more misses than hits. So uh, I, none of them really stand out to me. They just sort of all. I mean, I think they all just sort of merge together into like, um, yeah, you try, at least you tried. But yeah, but if I'm sure there are plenty of fans out there of very short treks, but in some ways where I think Lower Decks was having fun with the lore and poking fun of some of the established things in the franchise. I think very short treks sometimes. I know there was one episode where it was just like, or they were, I think they're trying to poke fun of the sexism of the '60s with the original series, but other, but it just felt like sometimes it was like punching down in some of those short trek episodes. So, so I think, given that we were having a franchise, sometimes it is very uplifting. Uh, Sometimes I just felt the short treks just felt better, punching down, or a bit that sounded good on paper, but whenever it was executed, just didn't do so well. And for Trip, um, you know, for the folks, for Enterprise fans, if we do see Trip in the very short treks, and yeah. So it was good to see Connor Trinier, but if I don't want to spoil it for anybody who hasn't watched Enterprise, but let me just move on to short treks. So let's move into the future, because that's why I titled this video, What's the Future of Star Trek? And this was a great article that was some art that was in a variety article earlier this year. I'm not going to go through that article because some of the things in there are stale now, um, but that being said, uh, what's first up in the future of Star Trek is this beautiful key art that we got today. Of course, with Lower Decks. And one of the awesome things that you'll see with the key art that Lower Decks does is they always reference one of the original series movies. So, of course, given that this is season 5, if we go back to the key art from Star Trek 5, the key art you see there, on the center below Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, you see the influences of Star Trek V in the key art for Star Trek Lower Decks season 5, which is unfortunately the final season for Lower Decks, and I'm very sad to hear that. But what was awesome today, and I hope I don't get a copyright strike by sharing this with you, And thank you all for sticking with me to this point. I know I've covered a lot of history, but I wanted to give that history because it is Star Trek Day. What better day to talk about it? But we did get a video, a clip today from Star Trek Lower Decks. So I want to share that with you now.
Oh, what an impressive collection.
Oh, it cost a fortune or two. Luckily, I've several to go around. I'm rich is what I'm saying.
Wait, is that a Velton Lust idol?
Oh, you have a keen eye. My most valuable piece. Had to slash the wages of everyone in my Latinum mines to afford this little guy. You know, they say the mere sight of it is an aphrodisiac.
Oh.
Captain, incoming Orion ship.
Merchant vessel, power down your shields or be put to the sword.
Ugh, crawl back to whatever slime dungeon you were born in, Orion.
I would rather die than return to my childhood dungeon. Fire!
Ah! They'll kill us all!
Nonsense. My defenses are top of the line. They'll never get past the barriers. I can control the entire ship from this room.
Wow, that's the first interesting thing you've said all day! The car! Defenses are down!
What is this? Who the hell are you?
I'm the mistress of the Winter Constellations.
Wait, am I supposed to know what that is?
I told you what would happen if you didn't surrender.
Whoa, stop! What are you doing? Oh, I thought this time we'd kill some of these guys. Do the whole leave one alive to spread fear thing. Right? But think about how much fear we'll spread if we keep them all alive.
Well, can I at least chop off an ear or a finger or something?
No! Now load up the loot and let's get out of here.
Astrid! Oh, come on! I've always wanted one of these, please.
Fine.
Oh, no! It's prescription!
Oh boy. That's like I said, this show yeah. I love Star Trek Lower Decks. It's just so awesome. It really is. And I hate that it's coming to an end. But that's a great little clip that they shared with us today. If you've been keeping up with the series, you know about Tandy there, how she ended up back with her with the Orions and whatnot. I won't go into too much detail because for folks who haven't watched it, I want you to experience it for yourselves. But awesome, cue to Picard mean is the mighty clap, and that's going to be season 5. It's going to be great. So they're going to go out on a super high note. Moving to other things that it's in the future of Star Trek. Of course, the next thing we know, we do have the Section 31 special movie event. Now, Section 31, of course, is itself is a spinoff from Star Trek: Deep Space Nine. Which is a clandestine organization, very similar to the Tal Shiar and the Obsidian Order, the Cardassians and the Romulans, respectively. This was a part of the original Starfleet Charter we learned in DS9, and then of course it has been sprinkled throughout some of the more recent iterations of Star Trek. We saw it in Star Trek Enterprise, and of course, Empress Georgiou was. Of course, he was from the mirror universe of character of original Captain Georgiou, who was the captain of Shinzon. Not Shinzon. That's the character. That's in Nemesis. I'm blanking. Shanzu, I believe. And Michael Burnham was her first officer. But she was. We have her mirror counterpart, who is now part of Star Trek Discovery season 2, and plays a very prominent role. Michelle Yeoh got a spinoff movie, even after now we can say Academy Award winner Michelle Yeoh for Everything Everywhere All at Once, but she is going to be starring in this. She was very, very pushed very, very hard for this, and it is going to happen beginning of next year. There was a teaser trailer that I wanted to show. Again, if you haven't, we did see the teaser trailer at San Diego Comic-Con, but if by some chance you missed it, I wanted to share it with you here on this video tonight. And again, I hope that we don't get a copyright strike from Paramount. So please, Paramount, don't copyright strike me, but I'll make sure to do all the appropriate things to make sure that that doesn't happen. But without further ado, here's that clip from the teaser trailer for Section 31.
Okay, ladies, now let's get information. I say.
An emperor can only be loyal to duty. Thus does the empire remain strong. Thus does it grow. All hail the emperor!
Giorgio, you're a tyrant who murdered her own people by the millions. The past always catches up with you.
You're Section 31.
Okay, ladies, now let's get information.
31 is a Black Ops division. Spy work. Starfleet is here to make sure no one commits murder.
What a cute idea.
Who to me, you got some coordination.
It's gonna be bumpy and bad.
You're a bad bitch.
We can't trust you with our lives, but here we go.
Somebody's got to keep it lively, right?
Now let's get information.
Again, she's such a badass. I'm really looking forward to this movie. And of course, this is one of hopefully many more movies that we'll get in the on Paramount Plus. It's going to be released to streaming. It's not going to be a theatrical release. Of course, we still may get a theatrical release for Star Trek 4 with the Kelvin universe. There's also the other Star Trek film that is also a prequel that is going to be an origin story of sorts that is in development and in production now. And I believe Matt Shackman, is the one of the writers with that. But that's another thing that's going to be in development for Star Trek. But on the streaming platform, of course, we haven't got an exact date for when Section 31 is coming, but it is going to be coming in early of 2025. Also returning in 2025 is season 3 of Strange New Worlds. And of course, we did get a teaser, a very long teaser. It was, I think, about a 7-minute video at San Diego Comic-Con about it. And I'll drop that link in the chat below, but in comments below for folks who want to catch it, if you want to watch this again from the beginning, if you joined late. But as you see here, we got Pike, Uhura, Lon, and Christine Chapel, all looking like Vulcans, and that clip does go into like why our characters are looking this way. But yeah, so Section 31 and Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 3 both will be coming out in 2025. Also, Strange New Worlds was renewed for a 4th season, so that is also great news about that series. And also, one of the new story points that we know about Season 3 of Strange New Worlds is Roger Corby, who, again, was another character that was in the original series and has a relationship with Christine Chapel, will be showing up in this 3rd season. And again, if things continue to hold like they have with Strange New Worlds, as I mentioned earlier, they're taking established characters but sharing new things about these particular characters. So I'm very excited to see what they do with Corby, because whenever we saw him in the episode What Are Little Girls Made Of, he was nothing really remarkable. But we'll be interested to see there. So you see a comment here in the fans saying that the Section 31 movie trailer is not made me interested in that movie at all. Again, some Star Trek works for some people, and some Star Trek doesn't work for fans, and that's the great thing about this franchise. I mean, we've got 50 years worth of lore to draw on. So if some of the new stuff doesn't work for you, I'm sure there's older shows that are from previous iterations of Trek or the Kelvin timeline that is maybe your cup of tea. But again, I like the great thing I think about Star Trek is it's a big universe and there's something there for everybody. And if one of the great things that keeps a franchise fresh and vibrant is taking chances and trying something bold and new. Sometimes it works. As I mentioned before, I was not a big fan of the very short Trek. I thought that was just Trek. So there's just things that they may take chances, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But we'll see what happens. Another new thing that's coming is Star Trek Starfleet Academy. Of course, we got some information. That show just started to um, be went into production. We got this cast photo of all the folks there in Toronto at the Pinewood, now rechristened Pinewood Studios Canada. But now, as you can see there in the still shot there, it has been rechristened the Star Trek stage because this is where Discovery, where Strange New Worlds, and now Starfleet Academy is going to be being shot. Of course. You see Paul Giamatti there. He's one of us. He's got his, live long, his Vulcan salute going strong. Robert Picardo, who, of course, is the doctor from Voyager, is also going to be in this show. Um, and I will pull up an article just to give some uh, some more details about Starfleet Academy. So bear with me. So you can see here's a table read. So Starfleet Academy has started filming. As full cast is revealed. Holly Hunter, of course, is going to be the captain, of the chancellor of the school. Paul Giamatti is going to be joining us as a recurring guest role. This story is from the Wrap. The story is the full cast has now been cast. They're attending the prestigious Starfleet Academy. Of course, as we learn in Star Trek Discovery, the Academy had been defunct for many, many years until it was reestablished in the fourth season of Star Trek Discovery. And of course, Tilly, who was a member of the Discovery crew, went over to become an instructor at the Academy. And also, the actress who plays Tilly, um, Barry Wiseman, is going to be a recurring character on Starfleet Academy, as well as the cadets who have been cast. The character names have not been given as yet, but we see in this article the cast is Sandra Ruska, Therese Brooks, Bella Shepard, George Hawkins, Kareem Diane, and Zoe Steiner. Holly Hunter, who of course is going to be the captain and chancellor of the academy. And they will have some familiar faces. Tig Notaro is going to be returning as Jet Reno, as well as Robert Picardo, and who of those two characters are supposed to be regular characters on the show. And then Odette Fair and Mary Wiseman are going to be reprising their roles of Admiral Vance and Sylvia Tilly. And then Paul Giamatti, as I mentioned, and Gina Yashari is going to be recurring characters for Starfleet Academy. The show's official logline is Starfleet Academy introduce viewers to a group of young cadets who come together to pursue a common dream of hope and optimism. Under the watchful and demanding eyes of their instructors, they discover what it takes to become Starfleet officers as they navigate blossoming friendships, explosive rivalries, first loves, and a new enemy that threatens both the Academy and the Federation itself. So that's some details about Starfleet Academy. Will it be, there's a spinoff of another franchise, The Boys, that had Gen V. I wonder if it's going to be in that kind of vein with that show, with Starfleet Academy. We'll see. But again, as I noted before, franchises have to evolve and take storytelling risks to continue to grow and prosper. So we'll see what happens with this show, but this is in production now, and it may be 25 or 26, late 2025, or maybe 2026 when we get it. Hey, John, good to see you. Thanks for joining us here. Good to see you in the chat. And as we wrap up, I have a couple more stories to share. The next one is, of course, we did get during San Diego Comic-Con news of the Star Trek comedy. I guess it's going to be in the vein of The Office and maybe Parks and Rec. Tawny Newsome and Justin Simeon are going to be the showrunner writers for this particular series. Of course, Tawny plays Beckett Barriner on Star Trek Lower Decks. Don't know if she's going to be in this show, but I think she's also going to be in the writers' room for Starfleet Academy as well. So again, it's great to see. Star Trek has a history of cast members either stepping behind the camera. Of course, we all know Jonathan Frakes. Has been a prolific director on Star Trek, but so is Roxanne Dawson, who was on Voyager, and Robert Duncan McNeil. Other actors have stepped, either once or twice behind the camera as well. Avery Brooks did in Deep Space Nine. But also now we're seeing people, of course, Patrick Stewart and Sonequa Martin Green were both executive producers for their respective shows at Picard and Discovery. And so, so again, Star Trek has a history, and of course, we mentioned Michelle Yeoh really pushing hard to get Section 31, and I believe she's a producer on that movie as well. So, so we see many situations where there in the Star Trek universe where cast is steps behind the camera as well as in front. And then last but certainly not least, we have Star Trek Legacy, which fans are still hoping for that show. I mean, a lot of things do. There is interest in that. Of course, Terry Matalas, who was the showrunner and of Star Trek Picard season 3, has expressed interest in it. Todd Stashwick, everybody who played the captain of the ship in Star Trek Picard season 3. Everyone has been very open about wanting to do this. Of course, the actor who played Jean-Luc's and Beverly's son as well as also Jack Crusher wants to do it. So, whether or not Star Trek Legacy gets made or not, a lot depends, quite frankly, on whether or not what Paramount looks like after the ownership deal happens with the studio. Of course, Paramount has been on the cell block for many months now, and not to be confused with the story that happened a few weeks ago about Paramount Studios closing. That was another part of Paramount Studios that was being shut down, not the part that makes Star Trek. Star Trek is actually made by CBS Studios. But that being said, CBS and all the things under the Paramount umbrella right now are Skybound Entertainment has made an offer to purchase this, but we don't know, but as of this recording, that sale has not closed. So, a lot is up in the air about what could happen to Star Trek once that sale does happen. So, I'm hopeful that we'll get something like Legacy, and we'll see what happens with these other shows. I mean, because it could possibly be influence whether or not we get a 5th season of Star Trek Strange New Worlds or any additional movies beyond Section 31. And then, of course, there's the feature films as well. So that's in production, and as far as in development for a prequel that's going to be theatrical release. So a lot can happen with this sale, but hopefully it'll all get ironed out. But we know for now, just what I've covered this evening here on Star Trek Day 2024, we've got a lot to be excited about as far as not only the last 58 years of this franchise, but at least the next 10 years and hopefully more of this franchise as it continues to grow and move forward. And I'm just excited to be along for the ride, and I hope you all are as well. And with that, in conclusion, as I said, I think the future of Star Trek is bright as long as we continue to allow the franchise to grow and to expand. Not everything's going to hit with everyone, and that's okay. It's art. It's subjective. Some things work for you, some things don't. But for me, I'm honored to be a part of this fan base, and I love, you know, shows that meet my expectations as a fan. I love innovation and storytelling. As I said, for it to grow and to cultivate new fans and keep us old fans happy, it has to evolve and it has to adapt and to the changing preferences of the audience, both but at the same time staying true to its roots. So as we look to the future, it's essential to remember that we remember the past, we acknowledge the successes and failures of previous iterations of our favorite shows, and using that knowledge to create a brighter and more exciting future for the Star Trek franchise. I believe that we can do that. We can make sure that Star Trek will continue its previous path of greatness and will be there for many generations to come. So, with that, Star Trek family, thank you all for joining me on this journey into the past, present, and future of Star Trek. I'm excited to hear your thoughts about it. So, again, before I sign off, be sure to subscribe, hit that like button, hit the notification button so you never miss a Scene a Nerd episode, whether it's Scene a Nerd, our main show, which this week Sarah and I will be discussing episodes 3 and 4 of Supercell that is on Netflix. And also, I'll be continuing to be doing more Scene a Nerd Presents Blurred Track episodes. So be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether it's here on YouTube. Follow our social media channels, as you can see on the screen scrolling there below there. And with that, be sure to, with that, good night, geek out, live long and prosper.